Hey there guys, this is Obsidian Chill. Got another video for today. And in this one, we're going to be taking a look at a review of the new artifact Reforged Tantu Totem. Now, I preface this saying it's not necessarily an in-depth review, and I'll kind of touch on some of those aspects, but later I just want to differentiate that at the beginning of this video. All the relevant timestamps will be in the comment section and the description of this video. I'm still going to break down exactly how this artifact works, go into the details of it, but there's two kind of main aspects that kind of make this difficult to parse and show properly without sort of like a live test or kind of like a better testing environment. One aspect is the damage that from Tantu Totem deals does not show up in the combat log analyzer, so I can't do that kind of like nice breakdown review in terms of parser comparisons or test comparisons. So that's kind of the annoyance number one. Annoyance number two is how this artifact functions, which I'll show in a moment. There is a big difference between how it interacts with burst damage and dot damage. So it can really play a large factor, especially when you consider dot dealing abilities as well as the strategist card artifact. So without further ado, let's get into it here. So before we jump in game to show the actual artifact example in practice, I want to kind of go through the rank comparison, the difference between them. So the main difference between, say, rank 80 all the way up to 200 is going to be how many abilities it takes to proc the actual aspects. So when we're looking at rank 80, we're starting at 10 cross-weapon combos, then 10, 8, 6, and then 4, 200, which you're going to see in the video. If we're looking at the shark aspect in terms of superpowers, it's 15, 10, 8, and then down to 6. And then for the gorilla aspect, you only get basically the next one superpower. The next one cross-weapon combo is 12 and 8. Then it's 20. And then it's going to be up to this. You still gain that 20%. But instead of the actual superpowers, that's changing. So from 1 to 1 to 2, all the way up to 3. And then same thing, the next 1, 1, 1, and then all the way up to 3. So in terms of what ranks are it's viable at, especially with the lower ranks, you're not going to really have that gorilla aspect that much. It's 20,000 supercharge for both 80, 120. Rank 160, it's 10,000. That gets somewhat viable just because you'd be able to use a one supercharger once, but having to use two 10k supercharges before you even proc gorilla in the second time, and then only gain the next one cross-weapon combo and the one next superpower, it's just not really that practical. 160 is somewhat viable, but still in terms of the full aspect, you're definitely going to want to have the rank 200. That kind of goes to set for most artifacts, but you could still get somewhat of a representation of the artifact at 160. Rank 80, 120, really, I mean, you certainly can mess around with it, but you're not going to be able to see really the true effects until at least 160 towards that 200. But those are the main aspects there. So let's jump into the game and show you the actual examples. So to take a look at the first aspect, so upon casting 4 cross-weapon combos, gain Lion aspect. And what the Lion aspect does is the next 6 superpowers now inflict 20% of their total damage again. So if we go into your weapons, cross-weapon combos, the combos along the bottom, or Whip Mastery, you'll see, so for example, Shuriken Star Mastery, on the left-hand side, you'll see that yellow cross-weapon combo. So if we use 4 of them, so that's 1, 2, 3, and 4, we're going to see the Lion effects animation for Lion aspect. So now our next 6 superpowers, technically, we'll see in a sec here. So if I just start using Gauss Grenade here, and it's going to be a little bit more than 6, which I'll show why here in a moment. So if we look at Shuriken Star Master, is that finished? And then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 totem procs. But I used obviously a lot more than 6 abilities in Gauss Grenade. So the reason why that is the totem aspect for Reforged Tantu Totem, or the Lion aspect, has essentially an internal cooldown. It's anywhere between like 1 and 1.5 seconds or so. That basically any powers in that window then get the 20% damage back. So for example, I dealt 38,275 with Gauss Grenade. 20% of that is not 15,769. But in terms of the total damage, so in terms of 78,700 and it's going to be more than that, 825 or so, quick math. So 20% of that will be the 15,769. So that's why you're seeing 2 Gauss Grenades totem, 2 Gauss Grenades totem, 2 Gauss Grenades totem, because since Gauss Grenades has a 0.5 second ability, I can use 2 of them if I wanted to, not necessarily in your actual loadout, you're going to be doing that at rotation. But because it's a quick ability, you can use 2 of them and have that window count. So this plays more into a factor somewhat negatively for dot damage. So if I do the same thing here, but we're going to switch to napalm grenade. So the way line aspect is counting superpower abilities is basically any superpower damage. So dots as well as strategy card procs will count towards the line aspect totem. Strategy card procs are basically the tactical advantage is not artifact damage. It's player damage, or it's basically the game is coding it as player damage. Same thing with the dot. So for example, if I just show this here, we're going to do another 4, 2, 3. So we've got line aspect. I'm just going to use 1 napalm grenade. So as we can see here, after Shuriken Star Mastery, I used just 1 napalm grenade, but I'm getting 3 totem procs. Because it's counting the napalm dot ticks as damage, based superpower damage towards that totem proc. So just by using 1 napalm grenade and having the extra dot ticks, I got the 3 totem procs out of that. And obviously the totem procs on the dot damage is going to be much lower. So that's where this kind of plays in negatively, both with dot damage and we're using a dot like based abilities, like say like a nature might rotation or even mental using like psychic prism, any kind of like fast ticking dot that ticks like I say every half second. You'll have the chance or the opportunity for that to count, for the totem procs to count as dot damage and strategy card procs instead of the actual larger basically like burst damager that you're using. So that's why this is an artifact somewhat annoying to test, because it acts completely differently in a dot versus burst rotation an example. So that's just something to be mindful of. The totem damage will proc off your dots and strategy card procs. So let's move on and take a look at the next aspect. So taking a look at the next aspect, we have the Shark aspect. Upon casting 6 superpowers, gain Shark aspect, which is the next 4 cross-weapon combos now inflict 12% of their total damage again. Now similarly with the Lion aspect, there are a couple of minor points for this. So for one, you don't have to do these in order. That's something that I probably should have mentioned at the very beginning. I could start with Shark Aspect. You don't necessarily have to start with cross-weapon combos. You don't have to necessarily go in order. You don't have to go from Lion Aspect, then Shark Aspect, then Gorilla Aspect. There's no sort of order to this. They can all be done out of order, and they will all apply their benefits once you've met the requirements. So taking a look at Shark, if we do 6 superpowers, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, I gain the Shark aspect. And then if I did a cross weapon combo, you're going to see that delay damage at the end. That's going to be the Tantu Totem. And if I go back to my combat log, you'll see that there. So after the Shuriken Star Mastery finished, the totem damage gained back 12% from that weapon mastery. Now the point to watch here is that clipping abilities don't. It's the same thing. There's an eternal cooldown where clipping abilities or any kind of abilities that you cancel very quickly are not going to count. So for example, if it's 6 abilities. So if I do 4 Gauss Grenades, 2, 3, and then 4. And then if I clip Gauss Grenade with Battle Display, I don't actually get the Shark aspect. Because that only, even though I use 2 abilities, it only counts as 1 because it was just too quick. And then if I do another Gauss Grenade, there's Shark aspect. It's the same concept if I'm using the mines to clip, if I'm jump canceling turret, mines, that was 3, 4, 5, 6, there's no Shark aspect. So just be aware of that. It's not technically I'm using an ability, it's that it still has to have an ability use that is long enough to count. So it's just to be mindful of that. Not that it's going to impact the rotation too much, because it's not, you're still going to be using the clipping abilities regardless, but it's just to be mindful of that. It's not that the power has to necessarily do damage. So if I do, say, just Battle Display, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 6, I still get Shark aspect. So the clipping abilities count. Powers don't have to do damage. It's just that if when you use 2 abilities close together, it's not actually going to count towards that Shark aspect. But just as I said before, you can start with Shark aspect. You don't necessarily have to do any kind of powers. I'm starting with shark aspect. Now if I start to do it, there's lion aspect, and same thing if I rinse and repeat. So the reason why I had lion aspect there's a very long, I wouldn't say it's an internal cooldown, but there's a very long grace period. So to make it so that if you go from ad set to ad set, if you get out of combat, you go back into combat. So just because, like say for example, if I do like one, let me just proc shark aspect here. So we've got shark aspect. So if I do another, like say 5, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'm 1 power away, and I'm just gonna do the line aspect. Let me just keep doing weapon combos for a while. Once again, I mean, it's not as practical because you're not necessarily gonna be doing this in content. This is more just for, say, like I'm traversing ad sets. So let me just, you know, there's line aspect again. Let me just get out of combat. Let me just jump around here for a bit. Different ad set. Let me just proc line aspect. So we got line aspect. Now if I do one ability, there's shark aspect. So even though I finished the powers, I got out of combat, used a different ad set, I still get it back. So you do have a very long grace period to most likely to account for the situations where you're going to be out of content or out of combat, maybe a cutscene, and you don't necessarily want to lose your entire combo chain. But that's essentially the power aspect there. Like I said, they don't have to be in order. You could start with grill aspect, then go right into lion or shark. You could technically almost want to proc lion or aspect, like say like 1 proc away, so that you use grill, and then basically then you're procking shark and lion as well. You got many different options available, but just be mindful of those clip abilities not counting. So that's why say for example, if you're pure precision spec and just using weapon combos, you're not going to be able to, it's going to take you forever to proc that shark aspect, because you'd just be using like, you know, your 1 power on your weapon buff cooldown. So that if you're using 1 ability every, you know, say like 12 seconds, it's still going to be a while to proc that shark aspect. So it's just not as beneficial compared to say like a Quizlet, where you're going to have passive damage that entire time. That's why you have to be properly hybrid for this to work. So let's get into Gorilla here. So for the Gorilla aspect, upon spending 5,000 supercharge with supercharge abilities, gain Gorilla aspect, which is the next 3 superpowers now inflict 25% of the total damage again, and the next 2 cross weapon combos inflict 20% of the total damage again. So there's a couple main things to unpack here. For one, in terms of 5,000 supercharge, it means 5,000 supercharge spent. So that means, say for example, I'm looking at Metabolic Boost, which is a 2500, and Pheromone Bloom, which is a 2500 as well. Did I accidentally take that off? So if I use just these 2 supercharges, 2500, 2500, I just gain Gorilla aspect. You saw it kind of briefly there. So it doesn't have to be a 5,000 supercharge. You could use a 10,000, 5,000, 2 2500s. Also the ally for Blue Beetle, for his aggressive motivator, using supercharge drains 2,000 supercharge and marks a target for 8 seconds. That will also count because it's technically spending a supercharge ability. And then the other is to impact is that the abilities, the aspects do stack. Not in terms of damage percentage, so it's not like you get 20% and then 12%, so for 32% total. It just means you get 2 procs at once. So let's set this up here. So I'm just going to use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to proc shark, and then we're going to go into Word of Power. So I've got shark and gorilla aspect open at the same time. And if I go into my log here, after I used my Shukenstone Mastery, I got 2 totem procs. So that the 1 higher proc, that's going to be the gorilla aspect proc for the wet cross weapon combo. And then the second proc, that is going to be for the shark aspect, which is the 12%. And then same thing. So if I did another one right here, I'm only going to get the 1. That's going to be the 12% because the gorilla aspect is over at this point. So that's something to take in mind as well. So the aspects do stack together. You're just going to get an extra proc. So it's not the actual percentages stacking. It's just the actual aspects stacking on top of each other. So let's get into a sample rotation here. So you just saw a couple examples there, and in terms of like a final thought to review on the artifact, it is something that I feel is hard to parse and kind of show properly in this kind of testing environment, just because there's so many different variations between, say, powers, between dot and burst, if you're going to use strat, and then run into the issues where it could technically steal dots, similar to like a dot power, like say that electric rotation. Sure, you're still going to get more overall damage on AoE with electric because of the multiple dots and the strat procs, but then you're potentially losing out on damage from Tantu Totem because you're using more of it's the 20% or the extra damage it's going to take is going to be based on your might abilities or your dot abilities or strat procs, which are going to be lower than, say, like a E-bomb hitting or possibly like an arc lightning hitting, which is just essentially a trade-off. I do feel this is not going to be just like a general DPS artifact that you just throw on. It's not going to be something that's just going to be universally applicable. You are going to have like a true proper hybrid rotation. This is somewhat easier to be achieved with gadgets. I do feel, and what from other people told me so far, they're running Tantu Totem on gadgets single target in terms of to maximize that, where AoE there's still better alternatives, certainly using Quizlet or like say like EUG, in terms of like an arch swap and proper rotation. That's what I feel as well. I feel you should passively for damage, like Quizlet, you're still guaranteed that passive damage, you're still guaranteed that supercharged regen. When you use your supercharge, you're going to be getting either a single target burst or if it's a 5000, that AoE. So you have much more passive damage out of Quizlet and some other benefits, where Strat's kind of like the wild card. Certainly, if you're running like a regular run, you're not going to be really using strategy card anyway, because even if you're using strategy card procs when the ads are dying that quickly on like reg runs or older elite raids, for example, you're not just going to get the full strat proc anyway, so there's no point. Strategy card would be more for like elite plus, where the ads have higher health pools and you can get that kind of the full strategy card procs out of it. But if you're running regular content, you're still going to be better off for using Quizlet anyway in terms of 3 artifact setup. But in terms of the totem, Tantu Totem in general, it's going to be, I still feel like a niche artifact. It's designed as a hybrid artifact. So if you were hybrid DPS, like you didn't want to be full precision, you didn't want to be full might, you wanted to mix it up, this is 100% level artifact for you. It certainly does make hybrid DPS more competitive. Because back before, if you were kind of doing your own thing, you kind of felt like a niche play style. So kind of somewhat similar like pet DPSing. It's like, I don't want to prec DPS. I don't want to use, spam like in terms of like, say like a meta rotation, like Whirling Dervish, Phase Dodge, Vortex Trap, or the Gadget rotation in terms of mines. Like you don't want to fall into that kind of niche or click. This one certainly does give you that alternative. So we don't have a hybrid artifact before that properly elevates hybrid DPSing. There's been some attempts like like Computer's Redistribution Hub. There's a couple other ones that somewhat try to be a hybrid artifact and provide hybrid DPS. This one truly does it because it doesn't really interfere with your rotation. You're going to be using mighty powers anyway, you're going to be using weapon attacks anyways, and you're going to be using supercharges anyway. So this basically just enhances your existing rotation. You don't have to change it. You don't have to add in some extra ability like Computo, which only really worked on like a stealth rotation where you can kind of hide that ability. So it certainly does elevate hybrid DPSing. In terms of it's going to fall into meta, I mean, like I said before, what I'm hearing from people is that it slightly elevates Gadget's single target, just because it gives the alternative than Quizlet, because Quizlet's not as good on single target. So it gives that alternative there to use that instead. But in terms of using this, if it's going to become like some AoE meta artifact, no, it gives you an alternative. So it's certainly something that you want to play around with. Unfortunately, with we don't really know the status, at least at the point of this video, in terms of 2x artifacts. So this would have been kind of like a perfect artifact to take advantage of that 2x art, where you could take an artifact that you don't like as much and then convert that in. Like say for example, you're not really using Piper's Fluid, you could transfer that into Tantu Totem and kind of mess around with that. So if you have got an artifact XP to spare, certainly go for it. If you were a hybrid DPS and want to kind of expand on that role, then certainly level this artifact. It's going to help you greatly. If you're more looking for like meta chasing, not necessarily this, there's going to be certainly alternatives that you already have existing that are going to be almost as good, or if not better. So take care guys, we'll see you next video.